Welcome back. We're now switching gears to a major international story that's capturing global attention, the escalating conflict between Israel and Iran. It has entered in its fifth day, with both nations exchanging deadly strikes. The violence has already claimed hundreds of lives on both sides and raising fears of a wider regional war. Israeli airstrikes have targeted key Iranian nuclear facilities and military sites, while Iran has retaliated with missile and drone attacks inside Israel. With political tensions rising and the world watching closely, I'll be bringing you the latest developments on this front. And joining us to do so, we'll be speaking to Hassen Seria, he's a Press TV's correspondent based here in South Africa. Hassen, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Salam Media. Always a pleasure.
Afwan, assalamu alaikum. Thank you for having me.
I think we can kickstart the conversation with just the latest, an overview of maybe the last 2 days of this conflict between Israel and Iran, and how it has escalated so rapidly over the past week.
Indeed, Salilo, I think that the opening salvo, of course, we had Israel there assassinating a number of top figures from the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps as well as from the Iranian government in that opening salvo that was launched on Friday. And of course, after that, we saw an escalation in which Iran vowed to retaliate, and it immediately did. It said this was part of Operation True Promise 3. This was, of course, the third in that succession of retaliations that Iran had promised after it had carried out the previous two earlier during the Al-Aqsa flood operations against Israel. But I think what was important from the developments that we saw, and particularly as you've asked about the past 2 days, is the extent of the escalation that Iran has managed to show. Of course, able to penetrate the Zionist entities' multi-layered air defenses, managed to get into some strategic sites. We've, for example, seen over the weekend the electricity plant at Haifa, for example, indicating that they have had to shut down certain portions of it. Also, some of the refineries of the Zionist entity having to shut down their operations. And more importantly, we've seen the amount of destruction in Tel Aviv and cities like Haifa and a number of other areas as well, that Iran has been able to demonstrate its capability here to penetrate those air defenses and to hit the Zionist regime in a way that affects them, such that even Israeli opinion public opinion here has started to shift and has started to question, because this effectively is the first time on this scale, at least, we've had, of course, from the Gaza Strip, we've had from Lebanon, we've had from Yemen, a number of attacks against the Zionist entity, against its ongoing assaults on these various resistance movements and entities within the region. But here we've seen at a state level a player coming in to this conflict that has managed to impact the Zionist regime on a level where it has caused for the Zionist public to start asking questions and wondering whether they are actually the invincible force, the promised people as such that they would like to portray themselves as. And I think that is what the past 48 hours has shown us. We've also seen overnight major developments in terms of the Zionist entity now moving to quite effectively ban or to impose a complete blackout on the strikes that has been carried out by Iran. And of course, this speaks to a certain reality that tries to, of course, impact on the psyche of the individuals within that regime. We've also seen a number of people trying to flee from the regime, and there are reports that, of course, because of the closure of Ben Gurion Airport, for example, and they're not allowing for any air traffic, that they've had to find other means of escaping the country. So a serious situation developing for the Zionist entity, the first time really, as many have put it, that they're facing an assault on this scale and that they're actually feeling it to this level, Salailo.
One of the most significant developments, I think it was yesterday, where we saw that Israeli strike on Iranian state TV. How significant was that move? And to this point, how much information do we have about that, targeting? And is this,
Mm.
a playbook from the general, Israeli kind of, propaganda machine where they start targeting media agencies? We've seen it a lot of times with journalists in Palestine. Are we seeing the modus operandi, unfolding here?
I think when it comes to Israel, what has been established for those that may have still had questions over the past 2 years or so is that for Israel, there are no red lines. It will attack and it will annihilate anyone that is in its path. It does not ask any question whether you're a baby of a few months old, whether you're a baby or a fetus still in your mother's womb, or whether you're a media worker or anything of the sort. And I think the attack on the IRIB building yesterday, and particularly on the IRINN, which is the Islamic Republic of Iran news network, which is equivalent to the local news channels that we would have here in South Africa, that it's quite an interesting development. The question is, what was Israel trying to achieve by attacking IRINN, which is the local news network, which essentially is a news network that broadcasts in Farsi, which broadcasts to the Iranian public. And I think this is part of the psychological warfare that the Zionist entity would like to impose on the Iranian psyche. What we've seen over the past few days is that despite the hope by Israel, and even those that support them in the West, for an Iranian public sort of response to the current assault, where they turn against the government of Iran, against the IRGC, and so on, that has not developed. And so this looked like more of a desperate attempt by Israel to try to demonstrate on live TV that Iran is being hit, that Iran is taking in the sort of hits that Israel would like it to have the Iranian public believe, and so in this way to manufacture that sort of discontent within or among the Iranian public to get down their morale. We know, for example, apart from that opening salvo, there have been a number of strikes by Israel, but nothing to the extent that has shown that they've managed to achieve any of their stated goals. Even with the attacks, for example, on the Natanz nuclear site, the IAEA has indicated that there was no breach as such of the main site, and so they did not record any increases in radiation or anything from the site. So this indicates that the Israeli strikes thus far has not achieved that sort of goal. We've also seen Iran managing to sort of quell and to arrest many of those that are part of the Israeli network that has infiltrated Iran itself with those, for example, quadcopter drones and the explosives that they've tried to set off in various parts of the country, and particularly targeting the air defense infrastructure of Iran. So, based on these particular failures, I think the IRIB attack was the one that came next, but it was very much for a local audience rather than something that I think forms part of that general playbook that we know Israel is so guilty of. For example, if we look at Gaza with over 230 journalists being targeted by the Zionist regime there, but it was a significant attack. IRIB itself is a behemoth. It is one of the largest broadcasters in the Asia Pacific region, and this was just one particular building. So this was a very targeted strike of the news channel. But of course, IRIB is essentially, it is a village of buildings that houses the entire broadcast arena of Iran.
Mm. This is happening all in the midst of a G7 summit that's currently taking place in Canada. The latest is Donald Trump, opted to leave early to Washington
Mm.
amid this crisis. What role do we see the U.S. playing in this conflict? What do you make of their involvement and just the wording coming out of Washington?
I think this is an interesting development, and what we're seeing is that the Israelis at this particular point, and it seems if we look at the extent of the conflict thus far, it is very early still in the conflict, and therefore we cannot say that Iran is sort of winning or Israel is winning in this particular situation. These are very delicate and very dangerous times, in fact. But what we've seen already at this very early stage is that Israel is now pushing for that American involvement. We've also seen that there are reports of a flurry of US naval vessels making their way towards the Persian Gulf. We also see that there's a number of military flights that are taking place to the West Asia region. Um, so there's clearly a build-up that the Americans are showing here that could be posturing. I think the Americans themselves on the domestic front are dealing with a sort of a conflict and a difference of opinion of whether they should get involved, to what extent they should get involved, or if they should not get involved. And maybe at a certain point, if they assess that things are looking sufficiently bad for the Zionist regime, that they may then get involved. I think there was that very peculiar tweet that or post on social media, on Truth Social, that Donald Trump issued last night saying that Tehran should evacuate. Now, of course, I think this also indicates the detachment from reality in various senses. The Iranians have tried to keep open the channels for negotiation. It has not said that it is leaving the non-proliferation treaty at this point. It is saying that it will still allow IAEA inspection of its sites, that they will still be able to operate in the country. There are suggestions that the Americans will try to still forge ahead with some sort of negotiations with the Iranians at this stage. And the Iranians haven't closed the door. They've, of course, said that should Israel halt this aggression, they too will then, bring an end to this conflict, because this isn't a war that was brought by Iran. So at this stage, I think that is where we're sitting. It is, however, a critical phase. We've seen Iran overnight, for example, escalating its assault. There are reports, of course, and because of the blackout that has been imposed by the Israelis, that we cannot conclusively confirm this, but that there have been reports from within Israel that the Unit 8200, as well as the Amman headquarters, these are both intelligence units of the Zionist regime, that these have been struck by Iranian missiles. And we also saw at the same time that Iran has intensified in that it has used a new technology and new weapons here, which the Israelis have again proved not able to detect early enough or to intercept as such. So it is a delicate time. The Washington is still pushing for Iran not to have any form of nuclear weapons, and it is sticking to that as a sort of a prerequisite for any sort of negotiations. Iran is, of course, clear that it has every right to continue with its nuclear program, which in any case is a civilian nuclear program, not a weapons directed one. But I think what happens on the battlefield at this point in time will give us an indication of how strong either of the parties can come to the table, and if they even will get there. Just on another level, there is also the concern with all of this American build-up. We know that the UK is involved, Germany is involved as well, that there is another level and another layer to Iran itself, and that is the Russian aspect, as well as, very importantly, the Chinese aspect. And the indication from the statements of the Chinese thus far is that this is not just a conflict where China has given sort of a very bland diplomatic statement. China has indicated here that it stands on a particular side, and that gives us an indication that there's a potential that China at a certain stage may come into the battlefield as well, at some level as well. This also speaks to the type of diplomacy that Iran has been involved in for the past 20 years or so, where it's become part of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. It is part of BRICS, of course. We know that Iran and Russia have their own sort of relations and understanding here in terms of the type of protections they will sort of impose and try to get involved in should either of the parties come under conflict. And that is what we are looking at. So I think Washington will be wary of these realities as well when it considers how to deal with Iran going forward. It is not a simple case of Israel here calling the shots and saying that the US should be getting involved.
Just finally, before I let you go, with the situation evolving so quickly, I know it's difficult to predict anything, but what should we be watching for in the coming days? What could be the possible outcomes or next steps in this conflict?
I think that in war that is really hard to predict. I think the Iranians are continuing with their escalation. Israel has said that it has aerial superiority over a large portion of Tehran. It hasn't yet shown us that it has brought that to use and for its advantage at this stage. We could be looking at a situation of Israel biding its time, that it has, as it has said with in previous circumstances. There's also been now comments saying that the pager attack that was launched against Hezbollah was just sort of a very basic attack, and what they've got planned for Iran is something even more spectacular, in the words of the Israelis. So it could be a situation that as Israel sort of approach Hezbollah, that sort of assault is something similar that it is applying here with Iran as well. So these are very delicate times. It is still very early stages, and I think that both sides are here relying on the element of surprise. Iran threatening that it will introduce new weapons. There's been comments from some of its leaders saying that they have weapons that the Zionist regime, the Americans, the British would not even realize its capability. And they've even said, if you want to join the war, join, but victory is with us. This could all be posturing, but I think it's also part of that specter that we are now looking at a new type of war. And one where there may be many surprises. So to predict what's going to be happening over these coming days will be quite hard. And I think for us as the media, it will even be harder now that despite the information age that we are living in, the type of blackouts that has been imposed by the Israelis, that it would be quite a task to really sift through the information that's coming through and to really establish where we stand on the battlefield. Salalo.
I wanted to let you go, but there's been another development. I think it happened about an hour or 2 hours ago. Israel said in its overnight strikes over Iran, they were able to eliminate Ali Shadmani. He's their current wartime chief of staff. And this comes after just a few days after he was appointed to replace another commander that was killed in earlier strikes. Do you have any information on this?
Well, at this stage, the suggestion is that this is an attempt to potentially gather some sort of information by the Israelis. But we also know that the Israelis do have some degree of real-time sort of information of what's happening on the ground, not just in Iran, but in the rest of the region as well. So there may be some truth to it, but I think the best on this particular matter would be to wait for an official announcement from the Iranians about this development. I think the Iranians also approach this with the reality, especially after the assassinations that we've seen with a number of the Islamic resistance leaders in Palestine. We've seen with the assassination, for example, of the Hezbollah leadership, the assassination of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, is that the understanding is that you are operating within this reality, that Israel does have a superior sense of intelligence gathering and information as far as these situations are concerned, but it clearly is something that I think that the Iranians have demonstrated over these past few days that they've made the provision for. that if the senior figures are assassinated in this way by the Zionist regime, that the battle, the resistance, that is what will continue. So yes, this is a development that we'll have to keep an eye on. But clearly, despite having taken out the top brass of the IRGC, intelligence chiefs over the past 2 days as well, this has not impacted on the Iranian response and retaliation as yet.
All right, I think we're going to leave on that note. That was Hassen Seria. Thank you so much for joining us. I will definitely be keeping tabs with you as this conflict continues to intensify, and there's a lot bombardment essentially of information and news that people need to keep up with.
Indeed. Thank you very much.
That was Hassen Seria, South Africa correspondent of Press TV, helping us unpack the fast unfolding and deeply alarming developments in the Israel-Iran conflict. And as the death toll continues to rise and fears of a wider regional war intensify, the world watches anxiously with questions mounting about nuclear safety, about diplomacy, but most importantly, the human cost of yet another front of violence in the Middle East. And with that being said, we have come to the end of the show. It's been another insightful one. It's been another educational one. We'll be back with you again tomorrow for the Wednesday edition of News and Views. Until then, stay informed, stay engaged, and as always, stay as human as possible. We'll see you again tomorrow. Shap, shap.